You've just entered the Disaster Tough podcast, the place for emergency managers, first responders, and humanitarians who want to get the job done. Stories, lessons, and tips are provided by field experts. This show is owned and operated by professional emergency managers at Doberman Emergency Management. We apply disaster tough logic by protecting life, property, and business continuity through planning, mitigation, and training. Check us out at DobermanEMG.com or click on the show notes. Radio comms just got a major breakthrough with the L3 Harris XL Extreme 400P. It's the newest and toughest radio out there. Built by their space and tactical teams, the XL Extreme series can take a beating. 1,700-degree blast of heat, repeated 3-meter drops, rain, salt water, you name it. The XL Extreme series by L3 Harris can take it. Visit L3Harris.com to schedule your demo today. The battle to monitor and contain COVID-19 just got exponentially better for us. We are officially introducing an electronic, reusable COVID-19 test through our sponsors. It's called the COVID Plus Test, created by Tiger Tech, distributed by FS Global. This is the first FDA-authorized, rapid, non-invasive pre-screener. It's extremely easy to use. Forget those one-time use swabs. This is a disaster-tough technology. For more information on the COVID Plus test, check out our show notes. Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this episode. Multiple reasons. We got the other Italian in the room, Ashley Lauria-Golden. Oh my gosh, I should not mess that up. Why? Multiple reasons. 3 reasons I could think of. Georgetown. We went to Georgetown together. Second, she's been on the podcast before. She was representing all of her background in Georgia with mitigation and as a paramedic and as a deputy director for one of the counties out there and planning and all this other stuff that she was doing. And now, most importantly, I would say, we have grabbed her. That sounds super weird. We're super lucky to have Ashley working with us here at Doberman. That was so weird to introduce that way, but we're super excited because obviously she has a ton of really great background experiences and competencies, and she's bringing a ton of Doberman working with us in planning and mitigation. And really, we're going to utilize her help with training as well because she's a lot of background with there. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. I'm so happy to be back, and that's okay. My name is literally a mouthful, and as long as you don't call me Laura Ashley, that's good. Yes, gotten that my entire life of why do you have 2 first names? I don't. It's an Italian last name. 2 names.
Well, that no joke. I say your name 50 times a week as we're talking to clients or as we're working through different projects. So there's truly no excuse. But I will say we are still super excited that you're working with us and you're coming back on the show to be able to talk about some of your recent projects, things that are happening out there in Georgia. You and I were just on a very fun meeting with a county, and they actually brought up a concern that at the time I was like, okay, I had to address it pretty seriously, but maybe you and I can talk about this because you and I both understand different sides of the spectrum of both working for government and clients or consultants coming in and talking. And now that we're in the private sector, how do we differentiate ourselves from that DC perspective of just money hungry, cookie cutter, to hey, we're emergency managers, we want to help, but we are also for profit, and how do we balance that relationship? So maybe we can talk about that. But my very first question to you, I'm going to call you out here a little bit. Are we LinkedIn official yet?
We are LinkedIn official. We have been LinkedIn official for at least a couple days now. So I finally
that makes me feel better.
Okay. So we are LinkedIn official.
That's awesome. Okay, so now that you're heading over plans and we're trying to balance this relationship, I guess that's a really good place to start. A lot of emergency managers are local here. They're trying to get things done in-house, obviously, if they can, but you can't get everything done. How do you find a good consultant or a good private emergency management group? And now that you're in the private sector, what do you think some things that we should be aware of as we're approaching people?
Well, if you want to find a good consulting group, you should Google Doberman EMG. But that's your starting point. But besides that, That is an excellent question because it is really hard. When I was working as a local deputy emergency manager, there's tons of groups that approach you and it's a lot to wade through, but you really want to start at the local level. Do your own homework. Know what you're looking for. Know what is your budget. If you're doing it over the course of a span of a few years, know your projected budget. Know how much you can bring in outside help to go through it with you, and then make your own checklist of your priorities. Because once you go through and know what your top tier need is down to your lower tier need, then start either reach out to you or, the internet is a wonderful repository, LinkedIn, other things to see what groups offer. But, they're scalable. If you need something that covers your whole county, like a local emergency operations plan, to something very small, like a specific annex, you need to make that clear because then you can find the consulting group that has the best background in dealing with that specific type of work.
Yeah, I think that's the right call, for sure. One of the comments that we worked with, for example, in that meeting, just for everybody else's situational awareness, it basically said the short, polite version would be, you can't possibly understand our problems because you're not from here. And the guy in-house, even though he's literally a team of one, should be able to do everything. And so I think there's like this call out of a recognition. And, we were on a Facebook chain where everybody's giving their different ideas of how to avoid consultants. Again, there's a stigma of like, if you hire a private group, they're just going to give you cookie cutter. Well, that's one way Doberman is trying to stand out of like, hey, we'll call you out if you think that we're just trying to do that. And we definitely did in that meeting. But I think there's also this, I think both things can be true at the same time. The local emergency manager will be most invested in helping out the community because he's there every day or she's there every day. But it is an inaccurate assessment, or I'd rather say the other truth would be the consultancy that's coming in there, the group, especially ours, that has GIS capabilities, that has a team behind it, who come from a background of response and planning, who actually knows how to do this because we were the government side. We can actually do it right. So most invested still do it right. And the way that happens is we pair the analytics, we pair all the team, we pair with all of our experience and training with the local. If you have a consultant group who's just saying, hey, give us 2 months, we'll come back to you and you'll have your plan, it's probably going to be terrible. But our big thing is that we're working with people and we're trying to get that done. So it's kind of comes off as kind of a pitch on this show. It's really not meant to be a pitch, but that's the things you should look for. But budget is a big deal. Budget's a big deal for a company like me. We hired Ashley, who's fantastic, but we still have to pay you. We have to pay you something reasonable, right? What? Wait. I have something for this. Wait for it. There we go. I should have done this at the beginning of the show. But like seriously, like what are some things, again, this is about education. If you can't hire a group to do that, how do you prioritize and how do you keep moving the needle forward?
So I think a big thing to remember, for emergency managers is that you can't always do it all on your own, or you can't do it all alone. And sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes. So that's absolutely where a good consultant group can come in. Like you said, one that's going to turn over a plan to you that they're going to work with you step by step and get your personal input on, not just, spit out a cookie cutter plan. But if you can't take that outside help and bring it in for budget reasons, work with your other departments, work with your other agencies. You're going to have to be including some of their capabilities in there anyway, depending on what you're writing about, and really have them walk through it with you. You're already all having to work together to build this, get their input, not just for their section, but on all of it. Leverage those around you in a different way than you may have before with just writing down their little section. Have them be plan writers with you. You can absolutely bring them in if you're working on an LEOP, local emergency operations plan. Have your roads and bridges, have your public safety, have your planning department step in with you and bring in those groups that are already, you know, getting paid by your overall budget to start doing work with you. And that's going to make your most comprehensive plan anyway, because then everyone is going to be really clear on their goals. Don't just take their information and their sound bites, really make them go through the process with you.
Yeah. Speaking of process, we're segueing a little bit. In fact, wait, before I do that, because like I'm like the ultimate like all over the place guy right now. Um, I hear a lot of chatter, or I hear a lot of people suggest don't go with X group, go with your local university, get a student to be an intern to write your plan. What do you think the pros and cons are there? I definitely have pros and cons in my head, but I'm just curious what you think about that.
So actually, where I worked previously at the local level, we universities where they were able to give us
Hey,
an intern
Ashley?
for a semester to come in. Oh, did it just cut out?
Yeah, be cut
Can you
out
hear
for a
me?
second.
Okay.
Yep. Can you edit this and start Ashley at what we do at the local, or what we did in my last job?
So where I worked previously at the local level, we actually had a working relationship with one of our large local universities to be able to have an intern come in with and intern with us, not just to plan right, but to be able to see how things go day to day in an emergency management agency, which was awesome. But part of their deal with being able to do that, because it was an unpaid internship, was to produce deliverables. So they then were tasked with helping us write plans. So we actually had this intern help us update our mass care, mass sheltering plan. And it was great because it took a lot of that initial template search. You know, we had an overall template, but doing some of the template updates, those just kind of organizational pieces, it took that away and took it off our plate so we could focus on other things. But the hard part comes in with just making sure that your intern is on your same timetable, because they may have a timetable based off of their semester breaks. You know, if they're in a school situation, they may have a completely different schedule than what you're expecting them to have. And ours did an excellent job. I want to clarify that. He did a wonderful job, worked incredibly hard, did a ton of self-research. But you just kind of have to remember they are a student. So they may not have a lot of real world experience to vet some of these things that they're using as example templates, especially if you're starting from the ground up, where you may then have to go back in and read it and make it clear, okay, this may have worked for this community, but this is not how our community does it. So it's a great tool, but you're still going to have to put in a lot of provider input when you're working with a student, because they're just still newer to the field. So depending on what your need is, it can be a great way to get that plan developed, but you're also still going to really have to help and handhold on parts of it, because they're not going to have necessarily, depending on their background, the operational experience to see what looks great in a plan versus what will actually be able to be built out in real world.
I'll definitely say that my first plan had a lot of red in it from my boss, just going through and just teaching me essentially. I'm grateful for that that he did that. There are three stages of competency that I see in general, and I think this could apply to any career field, but it really applies to us as well, because this field is naturally full of highly passionate people. When you get into the field and you're learning, you're super passionate, and you're that fire is just really really strong, but it's like it's on and it's off. It's like super passionate, okay, super passionate, and then but that doesn't really do like the cook really well, right? And sometimes that incompetency or that lack of experience that really shows through despite the passion. Then you get the second group, which is totally avoidable, but a lot of people get stuck in here, is you've seen a little bit of success, you've have a little bit of experience, and now you're super arrogant because you've learned two or three things, you're unteachable, you can't really move forward in that process. If you can move beyond that, and like I said, most people go through that process. I'm going to say that I didn't, but I probably definitely did. You get to this point where you get excited again, you get that passion. Now you have a ton of experience, and like now you have confidence. You don't feel the need to like blast all the time of that passion, but at the same time you can walk in and get the job done. And luckily for us, like we've been able to find a lot of good people here at Doberman who like have that ton of experience. And so that's what I look at when I think of interns or when I think of college students, is if you want to blast of heat, somebody who's super passionate, great, but you're still going to have to like manage that cook, add in all the other ingredients, and so it doesn't get burned. Maybe you want the sear on the steak, whatever. I'm getting a lot of cooking analogies, mostly because I'm
hungry.
Barbecue in Georgia. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good call out there. I mean, our company has also thought about internships. We're in St. Louis over here, and we have offices now in St. Louis, LA, and Georgia. And so it's like, okay, like how can we leverage the local community? But I think there will be a lot of hand holding if we do that. And so that would be our call out probably to other people is if you have the time to be able to train somebody, great. If you don't, then it's probably just going to be a burden. Okay, so now that we're officially moving on to the next topic, let's talk about your job here at Doberman. Some of the recent projects you're focusing on, and moving that needle forward. So, yeah, give us an update. Give the crowd the update, I guess.
So it's a very exciting time getting fully started and jumping right in. So a lot of what we've been working. Oh, wait for it. Nope, maybe. I'm like, get that sound bite. Gotta have the sound bite. But we are heavily focusing on hazard mitigation, which is huge for me because I'm a hazard mitigation nerd. I was very fortunate to spend some time working in hazard mitigation for the state here in Georgia. So I fully believe the good news of hazmat, as I like to call it. And so to be able to now start building the opportunity to work with local communities on updating their hazard mitigation plans, as well as if they have any interest in hazard mitigation projects. So things like getting generators for critical facilities, tornado warning sirens, tornado safe rooms, different flood mitigation projects, the whole slew of what's covered under that FEMA umbrella, be able to help communities really delve into that and better build up their mitigation, better build up their resiliency and their future protections against disasters, along with doing some other plans, working on some local emergency operations plans for communities. And then on the side, still helping with some of the podcast stuff and some social media outreach, which is a lot of fun as well. So it's all been a lot of really fun and a lot of really good things that I enjoy.
You made me feel like I was talking to somebody about like the role of a mom. Because like, hey, what does a mom do? And then like you start naming off like 100 different roles and responsibilities. And I'm like, hey, Ashley, what do you do? You're like, oh, I do 40 different things because we're a small company. And, you've been helping.
I'm a mom, so I do 400 different things.
Yes, and you're a mom. So like, yeah, so I had this. So Ashley knows Margaret Larson, who's on the show. We all went to school together. And I was telling her that we need to do an episode about how a mom is the perfect emergency manager, and like because wearing all the different hats. And we seriously need to do that for next May. I think we should have all the moms that associate with Doberman or who's been on the show come on and just be like, hey, I saved my kid's life 40 times a day, every day. Don't put that in your mouth, whatever. Dads do that too, but that'd be kind of a cool call out of like cross sector, how one thing applies to the other thing. But in terms of wearing lots of hats, yeah, it was cool because we're like, hey, can you take over planning for Doberman essentially? And let's focus on hazard mitigation. Our company, Disaster Tough, that's kind of what Disaster Tough's all about, right? Like stopping a problem from becoming a true crisis. And, almost immediately, small company, we, somebody reached out for a different type of emergency plan. And now here we are. We're having you work on multiple different stuff. So that's pretty exciting for you to work on. Moving forward, though, Doberman is really looking to kind of change. I want to say change the perception, but solidify the perception of emergency managers. I think that's like our big thing here. Like, how do we actually help people instead of writing the plans and saying, good luck, hopefully you don't have a problem? We're really integrated with those people. And so, yeah, I think we talked about this last time on the show, but you're the first person outside of my wife that I called and talked about this idea, responding to a tornado. And so it's just like kind of cool to fast forward, 5 years, and see this happen. So Exciting that you're on with us. Exciting that you're moving forward. If you were going to name the top 3 things that you want to happen with Doberman or yourself or emergency management in general for 2022, I'm kind of throwing this at you at a curveball. What would you like to see? What were some of the things that you'd like to see our field do besides hiring Doberman on everything?
That is a fantastic question. And before I get to that question, I just have to circle back and give a shout out to Maggie from our Georgetown class, because her episode was so impactful to me as a new mom at the time that it came out. She is awesome. So I would love for us to be able to do a disaster tough moms or emergency momagers Mother's Day.
Emergency momagers?
Yes, that is totally what I call myself now. Emergency momager. I would love to do that and have her back because she's awesome. And she gave, through that episode, a lot of encouragement to me when I was in a transition period. So awesome. Man, for 2022, I would love us to finally be getting on the back end of the pandemic. I think all of us definitely have quite a bit of pandemic exhaustion. So we would love to be able to, for the field as a whole, be able to concentrate again on more than just COVID-19. You know, obviously we got to get through it safely and effectively, but I think for everybody and, you know, just for how, for lack of a better term, burned out so many of us are, it would be, you know, just hugely helpful from the mental toll side to be finally getting on a more stable upswing. But I would really love for us just to, yes.
I think that's, I think everybody feels the same way.
So like, yeah, everybody's going, yes, definitely, yes. But I would love for us, you know, to continue to grow, but really to delve into that mission of helping the local community. I would love through all of this that, you know, that we're working on individually as a company, and then just for the field itself, for emergency managers. And I know it's been brought up on the show before, but just to keep being elevated in the public consciousness and to really be better understood, where we can continue to be able to get the ear, you know, for folks at every level of the rest of our stakeholders to be given that legitimacy to do what needs to be done. Because I feel like for so many emergency managers, you know, they have these fantastic ideas and so much growth and in all the different, you know, disaster cycles and preparedness cycles and every, you know, aspect of emergency management. But it's working with those other stakeholders and working within the confines of their communities that kind of hold them back. And, you know, just to be able to still push through and be able to do more of those things, to really be able to have the field say, we've finally gotten away from saying this is how we've always done it and it's going to be okay. Because that's been true in my life across working in public safety, emergency services, working in emergency management, that unfortunately it always seems to take something like COVID, like a 9/11, like Hurricane Katrina, something that just cuts outside of the norm for us to really step back and be able to say like, well, maybe we need to do it differently, but to be able to get on the front side of that. And, you know, a lot of that does come through hazard mitigation, and not just in the FEMA sense with the projects, but the whole concept of mitigation, of doing something beforehand, not just after the fact. That would be my biggest thing for the field, is just to be able to get out in front and not keep playing catch up.
Yeah, you just hit on the biggest the biggest pain point that we have to deal with, right? Like, well, actually the 2 biggest pain points is the legitimacy, and really that's on us, and then like getting ahead. Technologies are definitely underutilized. The whole cookie cutter, the problem, my big gripe with FEMA, as a former FEMA guy, I literally have an award, you know, like just chilling in the back here, is that everyone tries to put it in the box of FEMA, but FEMA's role is going to be really, really blunt here. They're basically the IRS of disasters. They're there for money, and they're there to coordinate, making sure all the resources are there for other people to do their actual job. And if you try to do it the way they want to do it, then you become the IRS of disaster. But that doesn't work at the local level, because you are actually working directly with the Red Cross to stand up that shelter. You're trying to get those preliminary damage assessments done. You're trying to do the evacuation in coordination with the sheriff's department. And so, like, all disasters are local. Locals should really be telling FEMA and or, you know, the biggest spectrum, hey, we're dealing with the impact here. This is how you need to be able to work with us so that we are able to save and sustain life. And unfortunately, I think it's kind of flip-flopped right now, because the title Federal Emergency Management Agency makes everybody think, oh, they're the ones who are the best. And quite frankly, they're not always suited to be able to understand the needs of the local level. So yeah, just really interesting thought process there. Gosh, you make me talk about that forever. In terms of us changing our perception, we definitely have to add legitimacy to that. What do you think emergency managers who are like, yes, every politician or every PhD or every boss I have who's not in this thing who gave me this job isn't understanding what I'm trying to do? What would be some of your advice to them?
That's a great question, because that really has been an issue across all the different places that I've worked. And it's just, sometimes it honestly comes down to that community being impacted by something before you're able to move the needle at all. And that's terrible, because that should not be the time that those, light bulb moments should be happening. They should be happening well before you get to that point. But I think a lot yourself, reach out and be really intentional with your most, not vocal opponents, because that puts too much of an antagonistic spin on it. But if you're an emergency manager, or you're in a position where you do rely heavily on another agency, another department, whoever does your finance, your budget, really make it your prerogative to get into the weeds with the ones who are having trouble understanding. Ask them to come sit in on different meetings with you, with other stakeholders. Bring them to your table. Don't just keep going to their table. Bring them to your table. Bring them in when you're doing different training exercises, whether it's just a small scale with some of your other agencies. Have them see firsthand in these kind of free opportunities to see more of what you do, so that they can see bigger picture how investing in what you're saying is really going to make a difference. Because it's, that perception shift can be so difficult. But if you can start chipping away with little things where they're getting a better idea of what you're doing, you're not just the great Mr. Oz behind the curtain, but you're being very transparent in what you're doing and how it makes an impact, that really helps. Or, if you're working with a board of commissioners and you have friends who happen to live in a commissioner's district, and they're willing to reach out on your behalf and do some of that kind of behind the scenes lobbying on different projects you want to work on, that can make a big difference too. Sometimes it takes that outside source also reaching out for them to see, hey, it's more than just what, my emergency manager is saying. I get it now. Other people are questioning it too. Now I kind of see, the bigger scope of where it applies. So it's hard. There's no perfect answer to that. And I wish there was, because it affects all of us in emergency management.
Yeah, it's brutal to deal with. I would say that looking at job postings before, I could tell if a community was looking to hire an emergency manager for the purpose of trying to identify somebody to blame, but that's really the minority. And most people hire an emergency manager because they think that's what they're supposed to do, and they have no idea what they do. And so, like, my call out, one of my many call outs is, hey, why did you hire me? Like, what do you want? And like, oh, I never wanted a disaster. Okay, well then start taking some of my suggestions. Or I hired you because I'm supposed to have an emergency management. Honestly, I don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And just have a very honest conversation of saying, let me give you like what is best practice. And when you use words like best practice and you don't use word like preparedness, you use words like readiness, then like you're changing this mindset from a doomsday prepper of things that never happened to, hey, I'm a logical person. This is a community. This is a standard thing. And yeah, I think we have to fight that quite a bit. I also think Doberman, letting the cat out of the bag here a little bit, if people check out the readiness lab and in 2022, we're going to be addressing this directly, not just from consultants' perspective, obviously, but from the subject matter expert perspective of how do we build legitimacy into our field. So whether you're working with us, for us, or against us, at least you can be known as somebody in a respected field who cares, who has that passion, but some intelligence behind there too. So good call outs for that. Looking at the time, it's been just over a year since we had you on the podcast. A lot of changes, including you're now your new mom. In fact, you were a mom last time you came on. No, you were pregnant when you came on. So yeah, you're definitely a mom now. You're living the dream. You're working for us. Lots of changes. You talked about upcoming whatever. If it's a while before we have you on the show again or not, what would be your advice to emergency managers in the field?
Keep up the good work. I don't think that they've heard that enough over the course of the last, almost 2 years at this point, that it's a wonderful field. It is a rewarding field, but it can be a really difficult field. So just, you are doing good work, not just like, oh, check plus, you did this and we needed this completed, but you're doing important work. You're doing good for your community. So just stay the course, hang in there, and keep doing what you're doing because it is making a difference.
Mic drop, quote moment. That's what's going to be on the quote. So now we know. Fantastic. Ashley, thanks again for coming on the show, helping me out this week. Also, thank you so much for helping out behind the scenes of the podcast with all of our guests. I'm sure all of our guests are very grateful for all your help there. Thank you for being an emergency momager. By the way, awesome phrase. That has to be like on a t-shirt somewhere.
You heard it here first. That's my copyright.
She's going to get royalty for the rest of her life on this. And also, I'm so glad you're part of Doberman. I've said it quietly to you several times. I'm going to say it publicly. We're very lucky to have you. Our company just got a lot stronger with you being a part of our team. Today's been not really supposed to be a sales pitch, but also kind of a sales pitch. If you want to work at Doberman or work with Doberman, now you know that we have an excellent emergency planner with us who has also response and paramedic and training background and all these other things, all these capabilities that you bring with you. And we're really, really lucky. I'm so glad we went to Georgetown together and hounded you for years to work with Doberman. And I just want to say thank you again for that. So.
Well, thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to be on this side of the screen and to get to chat on Disaster Tough. So thank you for everything and for having the faith in me too. So it's been good. It's been a good
it's
ride.
Easy. You're smart. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, everybody. I'm going to do my song and dance moment. If you like this episode, if you learned something, you should give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. Please give us that 5-star rating. I just want to see how many people like this episode. So if you could do that, that'd be awesome. If you have a question, a comment, a concern, whatever you want for our team, for Doberman, or for this episode, if you have a question for Ashley, the best way to do that is to reach out to us on social media. Make sure you check out Disaster Tough. Make sure you check out Doberman. And now check out the Readiness Lab. We have some other podcasts on there. We're really excited to bring those on onto our umbrella, if you will. So we'll check that out, and we'll see you next week.